Okay, let's get this going. All right, what I've got is a sheet of paper there, which I'd like to start on the back of it, actually. So being a trainer, I tend to keep it interactive and kind of go that way. So I call this the 6 Ps. I want to start with this real quick. We've got about 45 or 50 minutes for a talk. Let's write down the first word, and the first word is principles. There's 3 principles of selling I don't see going away anytime soon. I think his talk was excellent on where the market's moving right now. And there's always a gap between where you are and where the market is. So when I first started, the gap was leasing. So leasing was taking off. Dealers didn't know how to do it. So I moved into the gap with training. Then the next big gap was lease renewals, because then the cycle was coming off. Nobody knew how to renew. So I moved into that gap. That created a big gap, which nobody could organize their data. So you may not know this, but I invented CRM for car dealers. So back in 1995, I contracted out to a software partner of mine in British Columbia, and we created the first CRM piece in automotive. And some dealers are still using it. So the gap there was organization of that window. Next big gap for me was skills. And this gap right now is this experience between online and live. And it's a real interesting dynamic how some people start in the showroom. We'll talk about who finishes online and who doesn't. Some people start online, finish in the showroom. But with principles, there's 3 points to write down if you could. And there's 3 things that I don't see going away anytime soon. One is lead generation. So whoever your dealership or salespeople are lead genning, if the website's driving that, if you're still trying to call, that's going to be a problem. How many of you have no landline in your life at home? No landline, only a cell phone. Show me. I asked this question in the last 12 months in Honolulu, in Halifax, in Shreveport, Louisiana, in Tampa, Florida, in Seattle, in California, in Vancouver, right across Canada, and my guess is 85% of people don't have a landline. So we're still telling our salespeople to call your customers, no landline. On your phones, you have something called caller ID or call display. How many of you absolutely do not pick up the phone hardly at all anymore unless you want to, you know who it is, and you feel like it's something you want to do? When a salesperson calls you in line at McDonald's or when you're wiping your kid's ass, what's your reaction to that salesperson? Yeah, because we're caught off guard because these things are with us personally all the time. So phoning right now is, I'm going to say, pretty ineffective. How many of you have more than one email address, personal or professional, more than one email? How many of you pick and choose who's going to get what email? How many of you absolutely do not open up, answer all your emails? Even with the primary email that goes to your phone, do you actually delete things out of your inbox without opening them, yes or no? Who here has a hard time listening to voicemail? Who does not listen to voicemail? Who has voice to text? If voice to text isn't working, you say, well, too bad for you. If you can't articulate well enough, I guess I'm not going to talk to you. Who has that attitude? Yes or no? So to me, it's all about psychology. Now, how many times a day are you checking your text messages? How many times a day do you think we're checking our texts? Why do we check our texts like an addiction? It's short. We probably have a relationship already. Somebody's texting. And I'm going to tell you, I still have, not clients, but dealerships that I meet, that their managers say, stop texting people and pick up the phone and call them. Could you not send somebody a text that says, please call me? Are you more likely to get a call back on a text that says, please call me? Yes or no? There's still dealerships that block the server, so salespeople can't log into social media in the showroom. They got like a Faraday cage around the showroom. Who's seen this? There's a huge gap between what you're talking about and where the business is. It's not even funny. And lead generation is something you got to address. Test drives are still going to happen some way, somehow. Who's ever gone to a phone store and VR'd a car or done VR on a phone? Have you seen the technology of VR with a phone, yes or no? It's pretty good technology on a phone. So this is going to come to mainstream on websites. Cadillac, I know, just launched this. Somebody sent me an article through LinkedIn. It was called The Demise or the Death of the Car Salesman, or Car Sales Lady, whatever it was. And it was because you could do a virtual walk around with a live assistant on a car. I think Hyundai might have it too. Has anybody seen this? Okay, so what's happening with this is more and more of the decision making, the selection is happening, but people still, because it's a physical product and we're not living in, well, maybe we are in a VR if you follow that, but we're not living in driving a VR car yet. They still seem to want to physically drive a car. Is that fair? Very few people, local buyers, feel confident enough in the pricing procedure to finalize price online, especially if there's a trade. So today in dealerships processes, the gap is how are we doing with lead generation, pricing, and test drives? Because yeah, the online thing is there, but it's not taking away our job as a dealer. Let's write down the next P. Next P is practices. Okay, practices. BlackBerry, anybody kind of remember that company? They started the smartphone industry. They had 100% market share. You watch Noel Jerry Seinfeld, everybody's going, where's my BlackBerry? They had it locked. Nobody else had that technology. And then they did not kind of get it through their heads that everybody didn't need a keyboard and the importance of apps, and now you say BlackBerry and you heard what happened. People laugh. They laugh. Okay, so the phrase here, if you want to write it down and remember it, it's called adapt or die, or evolve or dissolve. But you got to keep it realistic to where the market is. When we drive our car, you can't stare at the speedometer. You can't stare at the car behind you or in front of you. You can't stare too down. There's a sweet spot of where you're going to look when you're driving to know your surroundings and drive into that gap. But there's a sweet spot in that visual, and I think business is a lot like that. Okay, so we have principles, we have practices. Next P to write down, please, is psychology. It does start with a P. Okay, PSY. This is my sort of claim to fame. I'm formally trained in a lot of psychology. I take a course from a few key people all the time. I follow people online that are into it. So my thing is really about this. And psychology really is the study of reactions. It's how to create a reaction. It's how to manage a reaction. And you can't take the psychology piece yet all the way into technology because people are still involved. So psychology, your own psychology, your people's psychology, how they're trained, what they know is still a big piece, as well as how your customers are reacting. And we've got a business unit we just started up to address what he just talked about, that nobody wants to fill in forms online. It takes too much time. And then once you fill in that form, how long does it take to get back? If you get back, most of your software is wired or is set up. You have a 50% chance when a dealership sends back an email, you're in the junk mail. That's why you're only getting 10 or 15% engagement back on your email inquiries. You're actually in the junk mail half the time. Like, big disparity here on how we have to communicate with the customer and how the market's kind of moved. Okay? So anyway, psychology is the study of reactions. Next P is patterns. He was talking about patterns, right? Where patterns are going to go, where they've been. A couple of problems with patterns. A lot of us don't measure our patterns honestly, or we're looking at the wrong number. One of the things we talk about in our trainings with internet leads is to first off measure how many people are even getting back to you. So your dealership's responding, and for the most part, you probably only have a 30% re-engagement rate. So that person's not even a lead unless you're having a conversation. So we've got to figure out how to re-engage that customer. It's not hard to do it, but you've got to track the right numbers. Now, an intelligent person, if they're tracking honest numbers, when they find out something's not working, you're supposed to make some what? Some changes. Could you imagine having a dishonest GPS? So you got a pessimistic GPS. Maybe that's your manager. So you think it's right.